What is up, y'all? It is Michael. It is Sam. You know what time it is. It's college football playoff season right around the corner. Got our first slew of games. Hopefully by the time you're seeing this, either today or tomorrow. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's a very exciting time. Before we get into all of that though, it is honestly very crazy the journey, we've kind of been on with this podcast. I've had times where we've been more, committed than others and, but it's been a ton of fun. It's been over a year now. I thought it was just yesterday. Rohan said the infamous roll Jesuses, and then TCU was on to the playoff uh,
65-7 loss.
championship. Yeah. Um, but yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. We really appreciate all of y'all's support. Even if it's something small, it's something we enjoy doing. And, if we can, have y'all enjoy even, some brief moments of our podcasts, we find it worth posting. So yeah, continue to show support. We really want to engage with you more, continue asking questions, in the comments, request what you want us to talk about, share your takes. If there are some bad takes made, let us hear it. We'll try to defend ourselves as best we can. But yeah, before we actually get into the playoff preview, Sam, I did want to ask. I think the Orange Bowl was played today. Any thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
played is a one way to put it. The
Yeah,
the players definitely took the field.
I mean, yeah, the same energy was kind of given to Florida when we lost to Oregon State and Oklahoma and UCF, but I don't know. I don't know if I can really let this one slide because it was the biggest loss in bowl history, I think. Was
Did
that
Florida get a bowl win today?
I mean, honestly, we spent our time hitting the portal, making necessary hires on
Yeah,
the
your
defensive
players were
side
hitting
of
the
the
portal.
ball.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could say the same though, right? And if they're not hitting the portal, a ton of them aren't even playing. So I don't know. Regardless, my team didn't lose to Georgia by 60 points. So rough day to
Sure
be
felt
a
like it though.
null,
It got close to it.
rough day to be a null. But yeah. With that being said, shall we get into the playoff preview? Sam, I'm not sure you had a specific agenda. I was kind of just thinking of going, each of the two games and then maybe some
Yeah,
predictions. So,
make some predictions, run it back. We got two really great games, and this I think is really shaping up to be probably the most competitive playoffs we've had, in my opinion. I can't think of a time were the 4 teams who made it, whereas this close together, 1 through 4. It feels like we've always had the 4th seed who's kind of lopsided in one direction and the 1 seed who's lopsided. Now, I mean, if 4 seed Alabama wins the national championship like you've predicted, earlier in the season, are we going to be that surprised
yeah,
if 1 seed Michigan runs the table or 3 seed Washington? Like, if anybody, or 2 seed Washington, sorry. If anyone really takes it this year, I feel like, it's going to be really competitive. And that's what gets me so excited for these two games on tomorrow by the time you guys are seeing this.
yeah, I can really agree with that statement. I think there, like every year, there's always been, one team that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. We've had the Cincinnati's, the Notre Dames, um, you know, but then on the other end, we've always had teams that just seem like more dominant.
The
Maybe
LSU's, the
Georgia,
Georgia.
yeah, Georgia, in maybe recent years, yeah, LSU with Burrow. But yeah, this year it really seems like it's pretty evenly matched. And, part of that is like there were probably six teams that could have claimed they had a spot in the playoff. Um,
Did Ohio State really have a spot though? I don't
well,
think
I
they
wasn't
really did.
including Ohio State. I was more so including FSU and
Oregon.
Georgia.
Oh, okay, yeah. I
Yeah,
forgot about Georgia. You're right.
yeah,
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 so that's 6 teams who really were worthy of it, and then
yeah. I mean, and then
okay.
even then, you have very good teams being Ohio State, Georgia, on the oh, sorry, Ohio State, Oregon on the cusp of that as well.
Yeah,
Would have been probably a great season to have an 18 playoff. We can talk about the
that would
implications
be
of
beautiful.
that on a different pod because there are definitely some setbacks, but this seemed like it would have been a great year to at least test it out. But yeah, I think with that being said, we can get right into the games. Um,
For sure.
so maybe we start with the 1 and 4. So number one, Michigan. Number four, Bama. Bama sneaking in over FSU. Very, very dramatic fashion.
Finish to the yeah.
Um, I mean, it really came down to one of the last plays of the game versus Auburn, where Jalen Milrow fourth and what, third
Looking
and
back
one?
on it, though, if it hadn't been Bama, it woulda just been Texas they put in over FSU. I think, we can argue it, but, like, if Bama beats Georgia and Bama has 2 losses, I think they just throw Texas in, keep Georgia in, and they call it a day.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you're just saying, like,
I'm just saying FSU is probably left out regardless in hindsight.
For Georgia?
Right, I think Georgia
Okay,
and Texas would just get in instead of Bama.
yeah. But, I mean, to break down this game, how do you kind of see the cookie crumbling? What are, some of the big ways each team can win or lose, and some key factors? How do you see the game kind of playing out, Sam?
I think this game, both, really have the ability to become interesting matchups. Texas and Washington is one of those that I think is high scoring and down to the wire. This one, it feels like more, defensive focus. Bama obviously has a great defense. Michigan, that's all they are is defense. Defense and running. There's before we even get to the on the field aspect of the game, we have to look at the off the field drama coming into it. There's the sign stealing. There's Harbaugh to the NFL. There's all the controversy that surrounds this team. So I feel like that is playing a distraction. JJ to the draft. What is going through these players' minds before we even get to the on the field part of the game? And then once we get on the field, can Michigan's receivers? That's kind of the weak spot of their offense. Can they create separation on these Alabama DBs? Can Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards poke holes in the defensive line and break loose for big runs? Can the O line manage with the injuries? They lost their NFL caliber guard for the season. So there's a lot of factors here that come in, mostly from Michigan's side. And then the biggest factor of all is that Michigan underperforms in these bowl games every year. They've lost. They lost to TCU last year in shocking factor in the playoffs, where Rohan made his claim to fame as a CFB pick guy. They lost to Georgia the year before. Harbaugh's never won a bowl game, right? He's always been either in the playoffs, bowl ineligible the one year in the COVID year, or he just lost his bowl game. So this is still new territory for Harbaugh, relatively, and it's going to come down to a lot, from Michigan's side. J. McCarthy's going to have to play like the top 15 pick that he wants to be in this draft, and if he can do that and these receivers can get open to guys like Roman Wilson and maybe you put Edwards out on the edge, he's the explosive back. And, overall in this game, I'm gonna pick Bama to win. I don't want them to win. It just only helps you more and puts validity in your pick. Um, but I feel like they're winning like a 28-16 kind of game, maybe 28-17 game in favor of Bama. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of see it in a very similar manner. When you look at, the four teams in the playoff, it's very clear who the two better offenses are and who the t two weaker offenses are. Big part of that is Washington and Texas are really able to air it out very, very effectively. Penix and Quinn have been doing it all season. We know, how valid they are, and they have the receivers to help do that, right? They get good pass protection.
Yeah.
And it's just a fine old machine.
Texas and Washington easily have the 2 best receiving cores probably in the country,
Yeah.
but definitely of the 4 teams in the
Yeah.
playoffs.
And that's not a knock on Bama or Michigan's, run game. They both have very solid run games. And Texas is up there too. Washington struggles a bit in that department, but when it really boils down, it's the defenses that hold these two teams together. And I think that's why it's so interesting. They're both very similar. I think they have similar approaches to this game. Um, I'm not so sure if you're Bama, how much you can really, really trust Joe Milton. I think the game really boils down to just a couple of things. For Michigan, the way they win is defense. You can get pressure on Milton, and at least, I think make
Milrow?
or sorry, I keep saying Milton. Yeah, on Jalen Milrow. Um, you can put pressure on him and really, load the box and stop the run game, force him to make throws consistently throughout the game, and just put pressure on him. I think that's a very good strategy for victory for Michigan. I think the biggest reason they might lose this game is I think they're relatively untested throughout most of the season. Um,
I agree 100%.
yeah, I think throughout most of the season, they're playing a pretty easy Big Ten schedule. I mean, they obviously have the win against Ohio State. They have the win against Iowa, but outside of that, are they really battle tested? I don't think that they are, especially to the extent that Bama has been. And I think that might come back to hurt them. And you already kind of touched on it, Sam. If I'm looking at the two head coaches here, I think there's a very, very clear advantage for Alabama. Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach in history, versus Jim Harbaugh, who has failed to show us success on the national stage in the college football playoff. I think, and when it really comes down to it as well, like one coach needed to steal signs and cheat, to have success, and the other, did not. And I think that, when I think it was oh, what's his name? Isaiah
Mhm.
Bond, I think, came out and said, "Oh yeah, we haven't been able to use the tablets like we usually do or something, so they can't steal signs." It's Bama's taking necessary precautions, and I don't think, Michigan's gonna have, you know, I guess the advantage that they always think they do. Um, and then another, I guess, major key for Michigan in this game is, can they replace Zach Zinter? The studded
Yeah.
offensive lineman goes down with an injury. Very, very efficient offensive lineman, only allowing 5 pressures the entire season and no sacks. And they're so reliant on that run game that their O line is pivotal in this game, especially when you got guys like Dallas Turner. You got to try to stop on Bama's defense. And for Bama, it's some similar reasons why they would win. I think it really comes down to their defense, which I honestly don't find many holes with their defense currently. Um,
I would say maybe the defensive backs, but even then, I mean,
yeah,
those guys have done well all year, really. But
I
when they've
mean,
been tested, I mean, you could say maybe the LSU game where they were kind of trading touchdown for touchdown until the Daniels injury. You can
yeah,
maybe point at that game and say that they were a little suspect there. But yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Bama's defense has been pretty lock up all
I mean,
year.
yeah, all four of their starting DBs have PFF grades above 80. And when you really think about it, Kool-Aid,
I know Kool-Aid. I'm not saying he's,
yeah, Kool-Aid, I
bad.
mean,
I'm
but
saying just
even
as a unit.
Yeah, Caleb Downs back there, the true freshman, has been a stud all
Yeah,
year.
he's
We knew
great.
that,
I'm a big
but
fan.
I mean, yeah, I think that might be their one slight weakness, but they've been very, very good. I think they also proved themselves versus Georgia. Um,
Hmm.
I think the reason why Bama loses this game, and the way I can maybe see it panning out, is if Milrow gets off to a slow start and he's kind of inconsistent, like we saw versus Texas, Tennessee, like we saw versus Auburn, even if that
Even
happens.
versus Georgia, when you go back and look, yes, he made the plays that he needed to make down the stretch, but look at the numbers as a whole. His completion percentage, so he's still really developing as a passer.
Mhm.
I think the way that he really impacted that game against Georgia was with his legs at the end and just, being the dual threat that he is. Michigan's defense is for real. Like at the end of the day, these guys do not let up a lot of points no matter who they're playing.
Uh,
They've held guys like Marvin Harrison in check and, you know, defense, that he hasn't really played looked okay. But other than that, this is the best defense he's played since the Texas game where, he struggled hard. So, yeah, so how does he adapt, to the struggles that Michigan's defense inevitably and, the big moment will put on.
yeah, Sam, you cut out for a tiny bit there, saying Michigan held up against, Marvin Harrison Jr. and all them, and if you want to expand on that, feel free. I think you're still frozen for a second here, so I'll let you load back in. But yeah, in the meantime, I don't know. I think if they get off to a slow start, I can really see Michigan making them pay. I don't think this is a team you want to get a slow start against, not just because they'll outpace you, because you won't get. Well, I hope we didn't lose all that.
I'm sure the recording's saved somewhere.
Maybe it's just continuing. I really hope it's still continuing.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, whatever. Um, so yeah, we got disconnected there, but Sam, you were talking about how, Milrow hasn't really faced a defense like Michigan. You want to kind of expand on that a bit?
Right. Yeah. I mean, defense. I wasn't saying that Georgia doesn't have the defense, but when you look at his performance overall, he the legs played a huge part, and that's, of course, part of what he provides, but his completion percentage still is not quite where you would want it, the accuracy to hitting the receivers. I think Michigan's gonna take advantage of that. They're gonna say, we're gonna make you be the reason that we lose. Other than Georgia, the other only really good defense they played was Texas, where he infamously struggled. So, we've gotten one good game against a really good defense, one not so good game against a good defense. This is gonna be your third test, third time's the charm. It's just gonna be, what can you do when this defense inevitably makes it hard on you? And I'm interested to see that. I know he can make plays with his legs, but when Michigan takes that away, what is he gonna be able to do with his arm down the field to put points up on the board? That's just one of the questions I wanna see answered. I don't doubt that he can do it. I'm just interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and I think two things really. One, if he starts inconsistently like he did versus Tennessee, versus Auburn, versus Georgia, versus Texas, and he's not very consistent. I don't think Michigan is the team that you want to do that against because the opportunities you'll get against Michigan are few and far between. And if you're already, getting off to a bad start and you're not really giving yourself a chance early, I think this Michigan team does have the physical presence on the offensive and defensive line to not necessarily wear out Bama on both fronts, but I think make it very hard for them to pull away and make this a comfortable, spot to be in.
Mhm.
I think Michigan, if Milrow starts slow, they'll at a minimum keep it close, and I'm not sure that's a spot anyone wants to be in on that big of a stage. And I think, the second point to that is one of the major keys in this game for me at least is can they protect Milrow? Can they give him the
Yeah.
time to really make those throws
They
down the
looked
field?
amazing against Georgia's line.
They did look amazing. I mean, talk
But
about
Michigan also has some difference makers, some wreckers on there. They've got that big D tackle. I mean, he's making some noise. He was dominant against Iowa and against Ohio State. So
yeah.
that O-line is gonna be a big factor too, you're right.
Yeah, I mean CJ Latham, I think he plays right tackle, and then I think it's Tyler Booker at left guard.
JC.
Sorry, who?
I think the J comes first in Latham's name.
Oh, JC, sorry. Yeah, JC Latham and then Tyler Booker on the offensive line have been super efficient. The one
Caden
question.
Proctor, the true freshman.
Yeah, Caden Proctor, the true freshman at left tackle, is probably the biggest question mark. He's given up, I think it was 33 pressures, 10 sacks on the season, but he did look good against Georgia. Only gave up one sack. Was pretty efficient against, what is always a formidable, Georgia defensive front. So if he can play like that, I think it'll give Milrow not only time for Milrow um to make some throws on the field, but maybe there's a chance they establish some form of run game against this Michigan team, which would be huge. So yeah, I don't know. I think this game's really interesting. I think it's going to be definitely more of a low scoring game. Probably be slow. I think I probably have Bama in a very similar score to you, like a 28-17 type of
Yeah.
game. Um, I don't want to really say any numbers because I think you kind of hit a nail on the head. Maybe we bet that. Maybe we bet those numbers. Not that we bet or anything, but yeah, maybe we shift gears now to Washington and Texas. Do you want to, give your little rundown first, Sam, or should I?
Yeah, I mean, this feels like the more offensive battle of the 2 games. Texas, for as good as their defense is and for all the playmakers they have there, they really often find themselves in these shootouts against teams that they should not be in shootouts with. You look at TCU, Houston, Kansas State, all gave them a run for their money and, put them in shootouts when they shouldn't have been, and I think it's kinda just a case of playing down to your competition really, because when, push came to shove and they had to play that ranked team, Oklahoma State, in the conference championship, they just dominated. Um, you look at this and you're like, it should be lopsided in favor of Texas, right? But every time we count out Washington and we put them on a big spread and we say, you know what? The moment is just too big. This isn't for you. Every time we do that, they come through and they win. They've done it against Oregon twice now, at home and neutral site. And I honestly think we could be in for some of that here. I would not be surprised if Washington wins. Texas, you know, I don't know, man. They look on paper to me and momentum wise, Texas looks like the team to beat. And yet Washington just had, I think Michael Penix, I think he's the best quarterback in the playoffs. That's just my opinion. I'm a huge Quinn Ewers fan, but Penix proves it to me time and time again. They have the best receiving core of anyone in the playoffs. They've got three guys who will all be in the NFL within the next 2 years. I mean, they've got a run game. They've got two offensive linemen that are getting built to win. And what we've seen in the playoffs, Michael, you and I both said this every year. The trend is offense wins. It's not the defense wins championships anymore. These are all high scoring games. And if anybody can compete in a high scoring game, it's Washington. I think Texas might even be the better team. But when these two teams match up on January 1st tomorrow, by the time you guys are seeing this, I think I'm going to roll with the upset. I think Penix is going to prove the doubters wrong yet again. I'm going to take Washington. I think it's going to be a high scoring one. I'm feeling like a 38 to 33, 38 to 34. Takes a last, 2-minute drive down the field by Washington. And they overcome because this game is either going two ways. It's either going like I just said, where it's Washington winning a shootout, or Texas is just going to demolish them in the trenches and they're going to blow them out. But I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna take Washington in an upset victory. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I really agree with a lot of what you said. I see this game being high scoring. When you look at both sides of the ball, it's very clear that, offense is going to dominate this game for both Texas and Washington. I like your prediction because I think Washington really matches up well against this Texas defense. I think Washington's O line has been stellar. That's not to say Texas's D line is not good, but I think the real advantage Washington has in this game is at wide receiver. Texas's defensive backs have been very, very suspect this entire
Exactly, it's a
season.
huge part of it.
Yeah, they've been super suspect. And what a lot of people are forgetting is not only do not only does Washington have 2,000-yard receivers in Odunze and Polk, but McMillan is back and healthy for this game. He was a wide receiver too over Polk at one point and at certain points last year.
Yeah, he'll probably be getting drafted this year too. If not this year, then
Yeah,
next year.
at certain points last year, he was more efficient than Odunze in multiple games. So, this is going to be an all-out pass attack for Washington. I think they have their way through the air. I think Penix has proven. I completely agree that he's the best quarterback. In the playoff. Quinn, maybe a close
I think it's
second,
between
but
him and Quinn personally. I think these are the
yeah.
two best quarterbacks that are
I
playing.
agree. I agree. And I think a big part of that is Milroe's inconsistency. JJ McCarthy has been pretty underwhelming last few games, but um
Agreed.
I don't know. I think it's gonna be high scoring. The one thing that's really interesting to me is I think a lot of people might think that a path to victory for Texas is establishing the run game. Washington's run defense shouldn't be slept on. I think that their run defense is very
They've
comparable.
been really good, especially against Oregon.
Yeah, yeah, it's been comparable to Bama statistically. And maybe Bama is playing more, competitive teams and maybe Texas might be more like talented on paper.
Mhm.
But the really astonishing thing about this Washington team is they give up a lot of yards defensively, but not a lot of points. They only give up about 23 points per
Mhm.
game, which is right, near Bama, who gives up maybe 18. And then, you got the Michigans who are going to give up, 9 points a game and but like they don't give up a lot of points. Their red zone defense is stellar. They show up when they need to. They'll make you think you're going to score on a lot of drives, and just for some reason they're able to get stops when they need to. It's a pretty stellar thing to see. So some of my keys for the game for Washington. I think the big way they win is just the pass attack wins out. Like I said, you have Jalen McMillan coming back, who'll be healthy. You already have two stud 1,000-yard receivers in Odunze and Polk. Um, and I think the biggest way Washington can lose this game is if the talent gap just overwhelms them in the trenches. Um, and they're not able to really like close out the game on Texas because of that, right? I think if it's a shootout, anything can really happen. We've seen Penix, perform in those scenarios, in those environments, but I'm really afraid that
We've seen do it twice against the top 10 team now too.
oh, I know, yeah. I'm just afraid that Texas, in terms of talent and in the trenches on both sides of the ball, is kind of a different animal than,
Mhm.
maybe the Oregon team that they've been seeing. Is that true? Maybe we'll see, but I don't
Well, I
know.
think when it comes to the trenches, maybe you worry about it more like Washington's D-line can't get home on Texas's O-line, but when you flip it and it's Texas's D-line coming on to Washington's O-line, Washington's got guys on the O-line that are, high quality, can service you. But you almost look at it like you look at the Miami Dolphins, right? Like, how much is a disparity at O line going to come into play when your quarterback is just catching and firing immediately, right? Like, the release time, if you keep your release time low, you get it to the outside to your receivers who are going to get open in open space against a suspect DB group. How much is the D line of Texas going to matter when you can kind of cancel that out by getting quick throws to playmakers in open space?
Yeah, I think that method it could be viable, but that allows for a lot, of stuff for Texas to be able
Hmm.
to do. It allows you to load the box, it allows you to, bring the safeties up, and I don't think that's a world they wanna really play in.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I agree. That's definitely, a strategy that's viable for Washington if that does happen. And I think the major key here for Washington is really to be able to finish tackles, maintain that good red zone defense because Texas is very efficient in the red zone. They're able to put up a lot of points on teams, and a lot of that has to do with, like you said, an almost equally talented wide receiver room there with Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and like we
CJ
said,
Baxter in the backfield.
exactly. And I'll talk about TJ Baxter in a second, but those guys are not to be slept on either. And if Washington just can't, make just a couple of stops in the red zone, um, this game could really, really go either way. And for
That's my
Texas,
biggest worry I is just the Washington DB group going against, the outside receivers of Texas because 'cause they've
yeah,
got weapons and Quinn can get the ball to them. So I think that's really my biggest worry is how does Washington's DBs line up
yeah,
against those Texas
and it's
receivers?
and it's funny, right? Because I think the narratives for both of these games is pretty similar, right? Like
Yeah,
Michigan and Bama, both very good run teams, and both have great defenses. I think it's almost the opposite for this Texas Washington game, where both teams are really able to air it out well, but don't necessarily have the best DB rooms or are very good in coverage, right? So I think it'll be very, very interesting. For Texas specifically, um, I think it's also can they just get a few stops on Washington? I
yeah.
think it'll really, really be who can make, the statement stops in the first half that really make you wonder, can we even, catch this team, right? I think, like you said, this game could turn into an easy boat race of a game where it's, just touchdown after touchdown, score after score, 5 play, 6 play drives. And I don't know when in that type of environment, we've seen Penix perform at the highest level. And you kind of have to trust that. But I don't know. A lot of times Texas just won't go away. And it's really a lot of stuff is left up in the air. Um, and kind of like you alluded to, Texas's DBs are not good at all. I think this could
Right.
be a very, very, successful passing offense for Washington in this game. I don't see a lot of chance of Texas really stopping it unless they somehow get home on Michael Penix and make him make those short throws, and make the receivers really, make moves in space, and yards after catch. Um, and I think finally, for me at least, the major key for Texas is can they establish a run game? Like I said before, Washington's run defense is
Yeah.
not to be slept on. Although some people, think of Washington and think, oh, bad defense. I think that really doesn't capture quite, the entire picture, for Washington. I think the run defense is actually pretty good. You got a guy like CJ Baxter back there, but the real question is, can he replace Jonathan Brooks? Jonathan Brooks was already a 1,000 yard back, really, really efficient guy. 187 carries, 10 touchdowns, over 90 rating on PFF. Jonathan Brooks was the guy. He essentially, replaced the production of Bijan pretty well. And CJ Baxter being a freshman, or is this a second year? It might be a second year.
I wanna say freshman, I'll pull it up, but just you keep going, I'll
Yeah,
pull it
but
up
but
and
but the
check.
point being, with a young talent like that, it's hard to, have surefire production, but if they're able to establish a run game on Washington, that opens up a lot for Texas. I think that really forces, the DBs and safeties and even like the linebackers to come up a bit. That really can open it up over the top for Quinn, who has a heck of an arm. To Adonai Mitchell, who, by the way, would have 3 straight national championships if
Yeah,
you think about it,
he would definitely be on a run.
which is insane. And you still got guys like Xavier Worthy there to worry about the other side of the field. But yeah, I don't know. This game can really come down to the wire. I am gonna go on a whim and say Texas wins in a tight one. I do think there is a world where Texas blows out Washington by not and by blowout I mean like by maybe 2, 3 touchdowns, not like what
I
was
agree
like
though. I
in the
agree.
Orange Bowl, but I don't think it's gonna be that. I think it'll be Texas by like maybe 10. I see it being like a 38-28 type of game where they pull
Baxter's a
away.
freshman, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No, yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, I see them pulling away late. Maybe Washington getting, a late, touchdown in garbage time to make it seem like a closer game. I see it being like a 38-28 game, but I really like your prediction too. I could very easily see Washington winning this game. And for me, it kind of comes down to the talent that Texas has across the board. They have a lot of raw talent on both sides of the ball that I'm not sure Washington can necessarily match
Mhm.
um, for 4 quarters. But I mean, we've seen it time and time again. People doubt Washington and they'll show up. So would not surprise me at all if Washington won this game. Um, and yeah, do you want to make any predictions for the final or
Let's leave the final because I want to regroup and we'll see what happens on New Year's Day, and
yeah?
then we'll regroup and
Do you have an
we'll
early prediction?
discuss that then. Real quickly before we go, just about Washington before we wrap up. I almost look at the defense and I like kind of give it more credit, if anything, when you're in the Pac-12 going against those potent offenses, just seeing how they can hold up. Look, other than Ole Miss and LSU, really, who were the dynamic offenses that they were going up against, right? Especially when you look at the home and road. I feel like other than that LSU and Ole Miss game, they didn't really play that many potent offenses. When you played Georgia, both McConkey and Bowers were hurt. So I mean, and even then they still put a 24 on you. So, how are they going to handle right like these other offenses? Should they win and have to play a Texas again or play a Washington again? But I think Washington's defense getting home onto Quinn Ewers, putting him under pressure is going to be key because if you give him time, he's going to tear you up all day. I think this game is going to be the more high scoring of the two. Could be closer. I just think at the end of the day, all Washington's O line has to do is just hold up, let Penix get the ball off, and I think those receivers are going to make a move. And I think we're in for a good playoff.
Yeah, and I think Vegas knows that too, right? I think the spread for one of the games is like 4.5, the other's like 2 or something.
Yeah.
It's very tight. I don't think Vegas really has a too big of a leaning on who's gonna win, and I don't either. I mean, I feel a little bit more comfortable picking Bama, surprisingly, even though I think they might. Are they an
I
underdog?
agree.
Are they an underdog technically?
Bama is +2, which is shocking.
Yeah, they're shown as an underdog. I'm a little bit more confident in picking Bama over Texas,
Mhm.
or that game, but I don't know. It should be great. I'm very excited. I think we're gonna see a lot of talent, a lot of proven, tried and true NFL guys playing who you'll see on Sundays very soon. So very exciting. I'm really excited. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else there is to say really. We
Me
got a
too. I
little.
think it's gonna be great. I'm excited to regroup with you once we're done, and then really, I mean, we can just wrap it up there. Time's obviously ticking down. We're in for a great playoffs. A lot of great players on the field, like you said. Just to reiterate, guys, thank you so much for giving us a first great year on this podcast. We're so grateful for all the support we've received, and we promise to keep upgrading the quality and making this second full year even better than the last. I'll have some transfer portal updates for you guys soon. Just waiting for some more big names to commit to places, and we'll of course have a recap of the first round of the playoffs, plus a finals preview. A lot of good stuff coming your way. I promise. I know I'm always saying it, but it's coming. Make sure to like, subscribe, drop in the comments what you want to see more of. Thank you so much for giving us your time as always, and until next time. I don't know. Well, I'm sure you'll stop the recording. I'll just cut it off.
63-3, Sam. Sorry.
Whatever, man. We
I
on to
ruined it.
2024.